Thank you for joining us for this episode of Gain and Glow, a healthy lifestyle podcast with me, Vanessa.
And me, Crystal.
Today we are doing part two of our special two-parter episode about mental health. So, right now, if you haven't listened to part one, you might want to pause, go back, listen to part one, and then jump back over with us. But if you did listen to part one, then let's just get right down to it. So, go.
Oh. So I think I just want to start off real quick with another dope quote of the week.
Let's do it.
All right. This one is from Rupi Kaur, Kaur. She is a number one New York Times best-selling author and illustrator of two collections of poetry. And her quote is this: "How you love yourself is how you teach others to love you."
I love that. It's so funny because like growing up, everyone's like, learn to love yourself, learn to love yourself, learn to love yourself, and I was like, well, of course I love myself. I'm awesome, but it's so much more detailed than that.
Yeah.
And I think right now, just kind of diving into the mental health and everything, it's so hard to love yourself or to manage your mental health or to stay consistent when you're constantly dealing with stress or you have compounding stressors. And I wanted to kick this episode off with that, obviously, because that's where we all are right now. We're all dealing with a compounding set of stressors that, again, like we said in part one, it really doesn't matter what side of any of this you're on. It's stressful. It's stressful if, you are scared of COVID, and it's stressful if you don't think it's a big deal but everyone else does, and it's stressful if, you're dealing with being home all the time, or if you're dealing with having to go in, back to the office after lockdown. Whatever you're dealing with in your life, stressors are everywhere. And when stressors compound themselves, it can exacerbate your anxiety and your depression. And it's really important to not only understand that that's okay, that it's not a bad thing that you're feeling stress and that it's triggering your anxiety and your depression, but also that there's ways that you can help manage it and work through it. So you don't have to avoid all stress, because obviously that's impossible, but you can definitely work through it. And there's like a number of different ways that you can handle anxiety and depression. And one of the ways that we want to talk about today, I know, is medication, because Crystal, you and I have two very different experiences with that. I know that you have taken medication in the past, like you mentioned, and you found help with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had taken something for anxiety attacks, and then I also took something to generally help with my generalized anxiety disorder. And I'm like, oh no, I've been labeled.
Isn't that funny when you're diagnosed, all of a sudden you feel so labeled? Like,
Yeah.
now I have a thing.
Yeah, you're like, oh, this is part of my identity. And it's like, no, 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 no. So, um, yeah, so something I wanted to talk about with medication was I found this quote from Gina Gambino, who is an RN with a BS in psychology, and she's a behavioral nurse in New Jersey. And she said this: "Often people with chronic depression are told by friends and family to just get over it, and they treat depression as if it's temporary, like a cold. People suffering from mental illness are just that, suffering from an illness, but not one they can just get over like a cold. It's more like cancer. They can't just snap out of it. It's an ongoing fight." And another thing I read off of the same article was talking about that using supports like medication shouldn't be confused with becoming dependent. And then this story was I was with a patient yesterday who said she wanted to fix it on her own, and I asked if she had had an infection, would she feel the same way about taking antibiotics, or would she just take them? She laughed. Sometimes the stigma of mental illness gets in the way of people getting the help that they need. And I think that's so true. I mean, I was even prescribed it, and I was hesitant. And I was like, I don't want this to be who I am. I don't want this to change how I feel. I don't want to feel, I don't want to be altered as a person. And I don't want to go through more brain fog. I don't, there's so many, there's so many symptoms, or I guess side effects that come with taking any kind of medication. And so for Wellbutrin, one of the side effects is getting dizzy, and oftentimes I would get dizzy, and it would just be just a moment of a slight dizziness, like if you stood up fast and your blood sugar dropped and you got a little dizzy. It felt like that, but I would just be sitting still, and so I didn't really enjoy that feeling. But that, thankfully, that was that was one of the only side effects I experienced with it. I mean, they could have been a lot worse, and I think every doctor checkup I had, I said, "Can I get off of it now? Can I get off of it?" He's like, "Well, we generally want someone to take it for at least a year, and then we can decide if we can lower the dose or how you are doing in life, and then lower it, and then you just get off of it." And thankfully, like with Wellbutrin, it's not a serotonin booster, so I won't have a lot of the side effects of withdrawing from getting that boost. The only thing he said, which actually just last week, I got told that I could get off of it. Has
Yay!
been a solid 2 years of me taking it, and so I was so excited, and he was just so proud of my progress in taking the steps to work myself out of it, and just treat myself better, really. um so yeah, so that was my experience. Is like I went through the medication route. I didn't really want to because I felt like I could do it myself, but obviously I kind of got myself to this point where I was very ramped up, and it was happening. Like anxiety talks were happening a lot. I was feeling really depressed every day, and I didn't know what to do about it.
And I think a lot of individuals who haven't researched medication and taking that route just automatically assume that it's something that you take and then that's that you're just now a medicated person, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
always the case.
Mm-mm.
Medication for anxiety and depression and any kind of mental illness should always be coupled with having a doctor or a therapist to not only help you work through those symptoms, but also help you work through the mental illness itself to get you to a point where maybe you don't have to have medication, or to help you work through almost like the stigma you put on yourself. Some mental illness, it requires medication for life, and that's not good, it's not bad, it just is. It's just something that is needed. And it's a, like you said, it's like cancer. It's, you don't just take a magic pill and then it all goes away. You have to continually work through that and continually fight that. And you just simply taking a pill isn't going to make it all go away. You also have to be able to work with a medical professional, and in a lot of cases, like your case, it can help you work your way out of needing that medication, or at least getting to a point where you feel comfortable without it. Even if you do still have some of the anxiety and depression afterwards, you're at least in a better place where you can help manage it. And then, of course, always continuing to keep your therapist on hand.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, I will say, like, when I went to therapy, I went for a solid year. And then at that point, when it got really expensive and it just really wasn't in my budget, I was really nervous about stopping. But also, I felt like I had already had a lot of tools, that I had things that I'd been working on. So I figured, well, I can at least go take this week by week and see if I am doing okay enough for me to feel that I don't need to talk to somebody as regularly. And thankfully in my case too, I know a lot of people, especially, there's so many different types of mental illness, and mine was really brought on by like just so much going on, like just so many different things happening in my life all at once, and me, allowing things to compound and do that. And there are people who have depression that's more of a, it's like more of like a big chemical imbalance. It's, there's people who actually need, who go untreated and feel like they're just crazy, and then there's people who really need medication to help regulate themselves and have it be part of their life. And I think having a trusted doctor too, because I know we both had experiences going to different doctors for different things and getting different results. And you're like, well, no, I know how I feel. I know I need help. And if you're going to try and write it off as something, then that is not the person for you.
Absolutely. And it's so important to make sure you're talking to a mental health professional, not just a medical doctor. I
Mm-hmm.
know that I've had friends in the past where they go to a medical doctor for mental health issues and they literally just throw pills at them. And that's not always the best option or the first
That's
step that
treating.
should be taken. You should also feel empowered enough to question a medical doctor's prescription for you if you don't feel it's right, or if you feel it's a bit much. And the best way to get that empowerment is to be speaking with a therapist. A therapist can help you work through whether it's a fear of the medication or a fear of accepting it, or if it's truly just something, maybe they are just giving you too much and you need a second opinion when it comes to the prescription.
Mm-hmm.
And the more and more we can talk about medication being a part of a treatment for mental illness, the more and more we can empower others to have that. Or to also, on the other end of the spectrum, go to their doctor and say, look, I've been in therapy for X amount of time and I don't feel better. Maybe that means I need a new therapist, or maybe that means I have a chemical imbalance that requires a medical intervention with a pill or treatment of some sort medically. And I'm so glad that that our society is opening up this conversation, because I know when I first started struggling with my mental illness, medication wasn't something that we just talked about. I So many years down the road in my life, I found out I had a handful of family members that suffered from chronic depression or manic depressive disorder, and they were on medication, and I had no idea because we just didn't talk about it. So I sat in this isolating little world of like, maybe I'm just insane or something, because obviously everyone else is dealing with life just fine and I'm the one struggling. But it turns out the whole time, I had this whole network of people that knew exactly how I felt. We just never talked about it. And when it comes to making that decision to take medication or not, the number one place to start is to talk with someone about it, a mental health professional specifically trained. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I know, I've taken the road to not take medication. I made the decision to not take medication for a number of different reasons. Um, in the past, I struggled with substance abuse issues, specifically surrounding pills, non-prescribed pills, opiates, and a variety of different types of substances. And for me, taking medication I have not yet become comfortable enough with my own self to trust myself to manage medication. And I've also gotten this far working through it with other tools. So I don't personally feel like it was something that I've needed up until this point, or really that I've been comfortable yet with. And it's helped a lot for me to speak with my friends like you, especially, to hear your experience with it and to start to get more comfortable with that idea. But also, medication isn't the only solution. Sometimes you don't have to have it, and that's okay. And there's other tips that we can use to work through it if you're kind of like me and you're not quite comfortable with it yet, or you don't feel like it's something that you're ready to start just yet.
Yeah, and I think that I um went I went through a different we've had two different lives. And I didn't experience anxiety until I had it all smack me in the face all at once. And then, like you said in the previous episode, you had an experience as a young girl, like 10 years old, you know, like having first anxiety. Like, oh no, you've been working with your emotions for a long time, like, and that's really great, because it's like, even though everyone's path isn't perfect, it's really about finding, like, the best things that will work for you. And I really feel like the things we're going to talk about today are stuff that has been helpful for both of us. And so whether or not you're on medication, I think just as a general human being, these things are are healthy.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you mentioned it's true. You and I lived very different lives. I mean, the your life path and my life path didn't converge until, what, 5 years ago or something, 4 years ago. And prior to that, we had completely different experiences with our families and with our where we lived and all of that. And every single person should accept that you don't need to be more damaged or less damaged than someone else
Hmm.
to get the same amount of care for your mental state. You don't have to necessarily have an extremely difficult childhood to still need intervention later in your life. And like we said in part one, again, if you haven't listened, please stop and go listen. But like we said in part one, everybody needs therapy. We don't come pre-programmed to unpack all of the feelings and emotions that we have. It's something that you have to learn how to do. And like you said, I started to experience my panic attacks and my anxiety and my depression at a very young age. And unfortunately, mine was a result of a combination of genetics and life experiences and traumas throughout my childhood that kind of just manifested themselves in that way. And that's, it's, again, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. But it's important to understand that you don't have to have a difficult childhood or severe traumas to have had some kind of trauma and to need some kind of mental illness intervention or help or assistance or a therapist.
Yeah, and I think what's common in both of our what a big thing that was common in both of our lives is that high levels of stress create anxiety. So like I found this article on Healthline, and stress was just one of the things that they had talked about. And what it said was stress triggers a combination of signals from both hormones and nerves. These signals cause your adrenal glands to release hormones, including adrenaline and cortisol. The result is an increase in heart rate and energy as part of the fight or flight response. And I read that and I have to share this because that's what happened with my first panic attack. I was in a tube rolling down a rail on my way to a job I didn't want to go to. And then when you're a kid, you're running at 110-degree heat. You already didn't want to run. And then someone's yelling at you to run and telling you you're faking it. That's a lot of stress all at once. And you're just like, it's a
And
very fight or flight.
yes, and right now during the pandemic and the
Quarantine.
yeah, quarantine and the stress of not knowing what's real. I cannot be the only person that scours the internet for hours long and at the end goes, "What? What is real? What is actually happening?" That can compound and be very similar to our situation, to the events that we experienced. You don't actually have to have you could literally be sitting in your living room and reading something and have that compound into some kind of anxiety or panic attack. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone yelling at you in 110-degree weather, but it's important to understand that that's what's happening. Is your cortisol is spiking, your fight or flight is kicking in, and I think a lot of us have that fight in us where it really, for lack of a better word, it really ramps us up. And if you're not used to that powerful feeling of being really ramped up all of a sudden, that in itself can feel very uncomfortable. Very, very, very uncomfortable. Especially if you're feeling depressed, but you also have a weird surge of energy. That feeling in itself, I can't describe a better way to like that is the best description of a panic attack that I can describe. Feeling
Yes,
both depressed and extremely energetic, and your mind just not understanding anything anymore.
definitely. Definitely. So, what do we do, Vanessa?
So, the things that we can do is number one, accept the fact that medication or no medication, there are other steps that you can take to manage when you're in a moment of anxiety, when you feel anxiety coming on, or when you're feeling extremely stressed out to prevent your anxiety from spiking. The number one thing, and we talked about this before, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to go about mentioning this, but the number one thing is taking a time out. And I learned this technique actually through a couple of incidences of taking anger management classes. Because I do have some anger issues that are a result from a lack of control of my emotions, which have been said to be a result of perhaps complex PTSD or just a result of my trauma. So I have a hard time controlling my emotions. And a lot of times when I'm feeling really stressed out or scared or sad really, I tend to just channel that directly through being angry. And so managing that anger and unpacking that anger has been something that I've had to work on my whole life. It's something that has been a constant struggle. And one of the things I learned from anger management is to take a time out, is to literally put yourself in a time out and remove yourself from whatever is causing that. Whether you're in a really noisy room, I know that I have an issue with sounds. If it gets too loud too quickly or for too long, I get extremely overwhelmed and I get anxious and then I get angry. And so I've learned that I have to physically remove myself from that area. Or if people are having a conversation about something that triggers me essentially, I have to remove myself. So taking a time out, even if it's a mental, not necessarily physical timeout, is like the number one way you can combat this anxiety and this stress from building up.
Definitely. I agree with you. And what's funny is I remember being a teenager and I would blast my music as loud as I wanted anywhere I was. My dad would always tell me to turn it down even though I was listening through headphones. Like so as I'm like as I've gotten older, not that old. And with this pandemic, I've noticed I've been pretty sensitive to sound too. Like even for a simple example, I actually love falling asleep with the TV on. I know, bad habit. Um, and lately, since it's been so hot, I have a portable like window AC. I had that going, and then the bathroom fan underneath my bedroom was running, and I was like, "This is too much noise. This is way too much noise. This is like creating all these thoughts of what are these noises? Where are they coming from?" Da, da, da. And I just asked my husband to turn them off, and that made me better. And during like working from home right now. I sometimes will just take a walk around the block, just that short of a time to just get me out of the situation, especially if I start feeling my anxiety kind of rolling up, which I feel like a good representation of that is like having caffeine start to kick in, and you're like, "Ooh, how do I use this energy?" And yeah, just something simple like that. Like that's my timeout. Like walk around the block.
I'm glad that you mentioned work because I think a lot of individuals' work is a huge stressor and trigger for their anxiety. Even individuals who haven't previously experienced mental illness, a bad job or a stressful job can be that one piece of straw that just breaks the camel's back. And I know that because I do get a little bit worked up sometimes, I've had to take time out where I literally put myself on a break and I punch my punching bag for like 5 minutes, just full force, as hard as I can. I like to max myself out. And it's almost therapeutic in a way where I'm like, okay, I've now put all of that into a physical release of energy and the impact of the bag and everything. To me, it's almost like completing a really good sneeze, and then I'm done, and then I can go back and I'm almost 10 times clearer.
That's awesome. Yeah, and kickboxing, man, that just even punching it out for like you think you could punch a lot till you try to punch for a minute straight, and then you were like, I don't have any energy to give. I'm not that strong. Like you're like, I am more now. I don't even know what I was thinking. I am physically tired now. And it's funny that you said that about how like people can experience high levels of stress and possibly anxiety, and anxiety, with the current situation, and then also having to go to work or not working
Mm-hmm.
or being stuck not working, or all these things. Like, you experience stress. We all have levels of anxiety, and um, I, I saw this person's post on Twitter, and it really falls in line with this, and it made me laugh so hard. Um, it's at Debbie Hope was the person who wrote it, and it said, "Before you diagnose yourself with depression, make sure you aren't surrounded with a-holes." Like, that might be the stress you have in your life right there. Get rid of it. Feel so much better.
Yeah, yeah. The people and the environments that you surround yourself with have an incredible impact on your stress and your anxiety. It's amazing how some individuals can actually be a detriment to your mental health.
Absolutely.
And our environment also can directly connect to how we're eating, especially with a lot of us being working from home now, or if you work in a job where you don't have easy access to healthy or safe, from COVID, non-contaminated foods. And a huge the other tip, the next tip actually for dealing with anxiety and stress is eating well-balanced meals. Making sure that your nutrition is also your medicine. Food is medicine. The we've talked about this in previous episodes, and again, if you haven't listened to our other episodes, I encourage you to do so. But we've talked about in previous episodes the mind gut relationship, and one of the best ways and one of the best daily lifestyle practices that you can implement to deal with anxiety and stress is to make sure that your meals are well balanced. That doesn't mean that you need to go on a diet and eat salads. That actually means that maybe you shouldn't restrict yourself to just salads. You need to make sure that you're eating foods that are high in vitamins, and like vitamin D we talked about. Who knew that vitamin D could help your cortisol levels, which
Yeah.
directly tie to your stress, which directly tie to your anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having a lot of stress and you're feeling like your cortisol levels are out of balance, maybe you need to eat more foods that are high in those vitamins that can help balance that. Or making sure that you're eating consistently so you're controlling your blood sugar levels, because that can be a huge contributor to your mental health as well.
Absolutely. I just I when I was working with a personal trainer, he didn't really have me go on a certain meal plan or anything. It didn't really, that wasn't part of it. The part of it was making sure, like, my calories in and calories out, right? So like, I was eating probably anywhere like 1400, 1800 calories a day, like on average, I'd say. And what he was looking at was if I'm what he really pushed on me was to, when you eat a carb, to eat a protein and a fat, and like try to combine your carbs with protein, fat, and like having vegetables. Like, really try to make each meal like a well balanced meal, because he was like, well, if you just have a carb, you're just going to spike your insulin, and you're not going to feel satisfied because you didn't have as many like dense like calories as in like the protein you could have had. Or like, it's so funny because like just those foods work together to help create satiety, and that's what you really want. And it kept my blood sugar levels low so that I never felt a spike, which helped me regulate my moods, which helped me be more consistent in showing up at the gym. And when I was going to the gym, I was heavily fighting through my depression, and I had just decided this is something that I know needs to happen. And so just showing up for yourself in little ways every day is really, like, makes all the difference.
Yeah. And especially if you struggle, if some of your stress and your anxiety stems from a lack of control, which I know that a lot of mine does. When I don't feel like I'm in control of, oh, I don't know, a global pandemic or ongoing protests, or, my dog not stopping licking himself in the middle of the night all night long, whatever tiny little thing it is, when I feel like I'm out of control, one of the best ways for me to feel a little bit more in control is to get back in control of my diet. And I say diet not as being on a diet, but the general idea of the things that I eat on a regular basis and how I arrange those during the day. I have such a problem with the weight loss culture that our society has, because I think that it robs us from the idea that food is medicine and that well-balanced meals can help with mental illness. This weight loss culture and the diet culture that has been around for so long, it's so emphasized on, don't eat carbs or be keto or, whatever it is, when in reality, you're actually, if that's not something that you've done your whole life, like a keto diet or a modified diet for health reasons, it can actually cause an imbalance and in your meals, which can trigger your anxiety. If you are on a diet because you're trying to lose 15 pounds because you're not happy with the way you feel, your meals aren't balanced. They're restricted. Your calories aren't balanced. They're restricted. And that's not healthy for your mind. Also, putting that kind of limitation on yourself around your food can create eating disorders, which are very dangerous and are a very slippery slope if you're not mindful of them. And it's so good that your personal trainer more so wrapped your mind around balancing your meals. Not, you were on a very extensive journey with your fitness and your health, and that could have been made or break. It could have been your make or break moment for your fitness and your health, is how he had your meals arranged. And I think that's great that he was more so focused on balanced meals, because eating a well-balanced meal it's so important. And so many of us are guilty of not doing it. I admit, I didn't eat this morning. I drank a cup of coffee and then I wolfed down an Eggo waffle. I'm not going to feel great in about 20 minutes.
Start the countdown. Seriously, I'm not perfect either. I mean, even with those guidelines, they'd have days where I'd be like, why are you eating a burrito from Del Taco? And I'm like, well, you got the protein and the fat and carbs. There's quite a bit of carbs.
And don't get me started on caffeine and alcohol. That is actually the next tip, is limiting your alcohol and your caffeine consumption. I think that directly ties with eating a well-balanced meal and making sure your food habits are balanced. Mm-hmm. You can eat the best balanced meals all day long, but when you introduce alcohol and caffeine to that, you're automatically going to start throwing that out of balance if you're not mindful with how much you're taking in. And I think oh gosh, I can't remember who told me, but I know that it was from a book that I read. She was talking about how a doctor will advise a healthy amount of alcohol consumption, and most of us don't realize how unhealthy our alcohol consumption is. Apparently for a woman, it's like, what is it? Like 3 beers a week or something is like the max of being healthy or something. I can't remember exactly. Please don't butcher me for butchering this, but it's amazing. I don't drink very often. I probably drink during quarantine, I drink more than I have previously. I've been trying to work on that. But I noticed that when I do, I'm almost exceeding what's healthy, even though I'm only doing it once a month. It's not necessarily about how often you're doing it. It's about how much you're taking in. And it's because alcohol and caffeine can aggravate your anxiety, and it can trigger panic attacks, and it can trigger depression because it does throw your chemicals out of balance. And like you said, caffeine, I think we've all been there when we feel ourselves getting ramped up from the caffeine, the sweat, sometimes shivers, maybe tinglies. To me, that feels exactly like an oncoming panic attack.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it is so hard. I know I talked a little bit in a previous episode of how I switched from coffee to tea, and that has helped me so tremendously. Like even just with lowering my morning calories, that kind of defeats the purpose of having of having a beverage. Like you shouldn't drink your calories anyway. Um, I can now have like half a cup of coffee, and like I love to blend it with coconut milk, and then I feel like I'm having a latte on those days where I'm like really tired and really need a little bit of a pep me up. But that's like once a week now versus every day like I used to do, which used to really affect my anxiety and also can interferes with medication. The medication I was taking too also added that, and it said that once I read it. So it's, yeah, definitely caffeine and alcohol. It's like you got uppers and downers, and too much of that is definitely not good. And I did a quick Google check on you, and it was consuming 7 or more beverages per week is considered excessive or heavy drinking for women. And so it's like, you could easily be like, I just drink on the weekend and drink 3 or 4 drinks each day. And then you're already like, you're at an excessive level and you wouldn't even think that.
Yeah. It's so easy to kill a 6-pack of White Claws when you're, there's no laws when you're drinking the claws, you're drinking with your friends. But it's really easy to overdo it. And sometimes I get frustrated because people like to throw around the word alcoholic a lot. And you don't have to be an alcoholic, a diagnosed suffering alcoholic, to drink too much. You can accidentally drink too much and it can get away from you. And then with coffee, I know I haven't cut down on coffee. It's something that I made the decision, instead of cutting coffee out entirely, I looked up how to balance myself a little bit better when I do drink coffee. Normally, on a normal day where I didn't oversleep, I would normally eat a really, really good breakfast before I drink my coffee, so that way it doesn't hit my stomach and my bloodstream immediately without already having some kind of protein, carb, and a little bit of fats in my system. And I've found that just eating my breakfast before my coffee has helped immensely in managing that spike and that weird surge that I get. And then of course being mindful when I do feel it coming on, telling myself, this is the coffee. It is not your anxiety. Don't worry. Easier said than done.
Yeah. Definitely. I noticed one thing too, that if when I used to drink coffee and I would just drink it and be like, oh, it's an appetite suppressant. I'm gonna eat my breakfast at like 11 and be good that way. Once I put food on top of my coffee, it like pushed it down in my stomach, and that's when I would ramp right back up to where I was. I was like, ooh. And when you're digesting and you have a ramped up feeling, that does not feel good.
That to me feels like anxiety.
Yeah.
And if you are feeling the need to drink coffee a lot because you're tired, there's a good chance that you're not getting enough sleep. And sleep and getting an adequate amount of sleep and quality sleep is the next best thing for dealing with anxiety and stress. Sleep. Giving yourself the permission to sleep. And I say that specifically that way because I have been so guilty of not giving myself permission to sleep. One of the issues that I have for some reason is feeling like if I go to sleep, I'm going to miss something. Or I need to maximize my day. So I'm going to go ahead and push it to the limit. I'm going to push it where I'm going to get maybe 5 or 6 hours of sleep. And it's fine because I am one of those individuals, I guess President Obama is too, I don't know, who can only sleep for like 4 or 5 hours and still function okay. Unlike, maybe a different person who needs like 8 or 9 hours. Which I think you and I are on the different end of the spectrum on that one as well.
Definitely.
But getting enough sleep and giving yourself permission to sleep. It's okay to admit that you need to go to bed. Which sounds so silly, but I find myself pushing sleep off because I'm like, I need to stay awake. I need to get stuff done.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't I love sleep. I have had to make it so that I like will allow myself some downtime before I go to sleep. Otherwise I feel like I can't sleep. And like we've talked about before, like winding down is such an important part of sleep.
Yeah. Also, I think that it's important too to understand if you're the type of person that needs to take naps during the day too, it's okay to take a nap every now and then. So yeah, if you feel like you're not getting enough sleep at night or you feel sluggish during the day, you might just need to take a nap. And naps aren't just for children.
Yeah, and our next tip is getting exercise every day.
Right? Which we did kind of already mention a little bit. It's so
Yeah,
important. It's so important.
yeah, anything. I mean, just a walk around the block a few times a day really adds up.
Yes. Or incorporating yoga into your daily meditation, which that's another thing is dealing with stress and anxiety. Sometimes you have to take a couple of deep breaths and center yourself.
Hmm.
And the best way to do that is meditating. And it's really easy to create a meditation hybrid or even meditating during your walk. You can get two things
Absolutely.
done at once that are going to benefit you so much.
Definitely. There, if you guys check out the Headspace app, which I mean, I know that I just talk about it all the time, they actually have meditation walks now where they're like, take in what you're seeing, take a deep breath, listen to the sounds and stuff like that. Just doing an action with your meditation is also meditation. It's calms your brain.
And then also understanding that at any given point, all you really need to do is do your best. Meet those little goals. Don't make it, oh, I have to work out for 45 minutes hardcore today because today I have to work out today every day. You know, it's okay if it's just a 10-minute walk. It's okay. That's you're doing your best. Accept that you're doing your best and be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, really give yourself credit for all the little things that you do for yourself because appreciation and gratitude is something that we need to do more for ourselves as much as we love to do for others.
Yeah. It's really important to try to treat yourself the way that you would treat your good friend because you should be your best friend. And
I
then
love that.
and then of course at every point in the day that you can take some time to laugh. Laughing what Crystal, didn't you find laughing releases, serotonin and
Yeah. So researchers have found that laughing significantly reduces stress hormone levels. In one study, laughter decreased cortisol levels, which I mean, we're all trying to do that. Decreased the levels of participants by nearly 50%. So to end on a note about laughter, the next time you're feeling anxious, try watching comedy or a funny YouTube video or rewatch one of your favorite shows because rewatching something you already know what's going to happen is calming in itself.
yeah, and if you're not sure what show to watch, The Office is great. That is my go-to. The Office or Parks and Rec. They're
Mine too.
positive, they're funny, and I always, because I've binged them about 300,000 times, I know what's gonna happen, and that's very comforting.
I think we quote The Office to each other a lot.
Yeah. I know I wanna just like end the episode on an Office quote, but I honestly I couldn't pick one, I don't think. Except
Oh.
maybe Bo Body. Bo Body.
That's what she said.
That's what she said. But yeah, so anxiety, stress, depression, mental health in general. Mental health is not something that only certain people need to manage and deal with. And self-care isn't just for the wealthy. Mental health and taking care of your mental health and practicing self-care and being mindful and taking the steps, whether you choose to go the route of medication or you don't, it's okay as long as you're mindfully taking the steps to get through and learn how to live a really full life no matter what.
Definitely. And until next time, guys, thanks
Thank
for
you for
tuning
listening.
in. Bye.
Bye.